Your brother needed a fast car more than you need a house. I heard those words 4 months after I watched my mother hand my brother the keys to a car I didn't know existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that dinner, the one where I should have seen it coming. It was a Tuesday. My parents' house in Millbrook, the same split level they'd lived in since I was 7. The smell of pot roast and the sound of my father's voice filling every corner of the room. I'd driven 40 minutes from my apartment in Richmond after a 10-hour shift at the accounting firm, still in my blazer, still hoping this time would be different. I'd saved for 6 years. 6 years of meal prep and library books and a car with 180,000 miles that I refused to replace. I'd finally hit the number. 20% down. Pre-approval letter sitting in my glove compartment, printed that morning. I was going to tell them at dinner. I was going to say, I'm buying a house. I was going to hear congratulations. Instead, my mother stood up from the table, her hand disappearing into her purse, and pulled out a set of keys. Not house keys, car keys, black fob, silver emblem, the kind that makes a sound when you press the button. For my golden boy, she said. My brother Derek grinned. He was 26, 2 years younger than me, and he'd never held a job longer than 8 months. His latest was sales development, which meant he made cold calls from his childhood bedroom and complained about millennials not answering their phones. New job deserves new wheels, my father said, raising his wine glass. To Derek, moving up in the world. I looked at the car keys, then at my brother, then at my mother, who was watching Derek with an expression I'd seen directed at him my entire life. Pride, uncomplicated and absolute. That's wonderful, I said. The words felt like sand. My father turned to me. Claire's doing well too, aren't you, sweetheart? I opened my mouth. The pre-approval letter burned in my memory, 3 blocks away in my glove compartment, 20 minutes from here. Claire, honey, my mother interrupted, her hand on my shoulder, would you mind grabbing the check? Derek's been so stressed with the new position and we want to celebrate properly. You understand. She didn't wait for an answer. She never did. She just pressed her credit card into my palm, the one she kept for emergencies, and smiled in a way that meant this was my contribution to the family. This was how I participated. The bill was $287. I paid it. I always paid it. In the parking lot, Derek revved the engine of a car I still hadn't seen. Midnight blue, 2 doors, exhaust that purred like something hungry. He rolled down the window. Thanks for dinner, sis. You should get one of these. Oh, wait, he laughed. You can't even get approved for a credit card. He peeled out. My mother waved. My father was already in his truck, engine running, checking his phone. I drove them home, that's what I did. I drove them home and I walked them to the door and I was turning to leave when I saw it. A piece of mail on the counter. White envelope, blue logo, the kind that comes from lenders. My name was printed in the window. Claire Brennan, not my mother's name, not my father's, mine. My mother saw me see it. She moved faster than I'd ever seen her move, snatching the envelope and pressing it against her chest like a secret. Claire, you should go, it's late. What was that? Nothing, junk mail, they send those to everyone. She was lying. I knew she was lying. I'd spent 6 years in financial compliance, reviewing loan applications, spotting irregularities, catching the small tells that meant someone was hiding something. The envelope was thick. The kind that holds statements. The kind that comes after approval. Mom, Claire, my father's voice from the hallway. Your mother said it's nothing, go home. I went home. I sat in my apartment with the pre-approval letter on my kitchen table and told myself I was imagining things. Paranoia from too many hours reviewing other people's fraud. My parents wouldn't. My family wouldn't. I was wrong. That was September. By December, I would know exactly how wrong. The loan officer's name was Patricia. She'd helped me with the pre-approval in September, remembered my name when I walked in, smiled like we were continuing a conversation we'd already started. Claire Brennan, back to make it official. I am. I slid the pre-approval letter across her desk. I've found the house. Inspection cleared, ready to move forward. She typed something into her computer. Her fingers stopped. She typed again. Her smile didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A shift, a recalculation. Let me pull your full report, just a moment. I sat in the chair I'd imagined sitting in 100 times, the chair where I would finally become a homeowner, the chair where my life would expand from 650 square feet to something with a yard, a porch, a room I could call an office instead of a corner of my bedroom. Patricia's printer word. She didn't look at me while she waited. That was the first warning I didn't recognize. Claire. She turned the paper around so I could read it. I'm required to provide this in writing. DENIED. The word was centered, bold, official. Your credit score has dropped 147 points since September. There are 9 new accounts on your report. Total outstanding balance of $124,600. I stared at the number. It was larger than my annual salary, larger than my savings, larger than any number I had ever associated with my own name. That's impossible. I've printed the details. She slid another sheet across. 7 credit cards, 2 auto loans, all opened between September and November, all with payments made initially then stopped, all currently in delinquency. I read the addresses, every single one. My parents' house. 1847 Oakwood Drive, Millbrook, Virginia. The house where I'd eaten dinner 3 nights ago. The house where my mother had snatched an envelope with my name on it and told me it was nothing. The auto loans. My voice sounded like someone else's. What kind of cars? Patricia checked her screen. One 2023 Ford Mustang, one 2022 BMW X5. Derek's midnight blue coupe, the car I'd paid for at dinner, and another car I didn't know about. 2 cars, 2 auto loans, my name on both. I didn't open these accounts. I believe you. Patricia's voice was careful, professional, the tone of someone who had said these words before. But the signatures match. At least the lenders believed they matched. The mailing address is your parents' residence. The phone number on file, she checked, is your mother's cell. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the counter, the same gesture my father made when he was controlling his temper. I was becoming him. I was becoming the person who had done this to me. What do I do? Patricia reached into her drawer and pulled out a pamphlet. Identity theft reporting. You'll need to file a police report. You'll need to contact each lender directly. She paused, you'll need to consider whether you're prepared to pursue this legally. Given the address and the relationship, these are likely family members. The process becomes complicated. Complicated. The word people used when they meant painful. When they meant the truth would cost more than the lie. I drove home with the denial letter on my passenger seat. I didn't cry. I had learned not to cry in cars. Crying in cars meant pulling over, meant losing time, meant arriving somewhere with evidence of weakness on my face. I sat in my apartment parking lot and pulled up my credit report on my phone. 9 accounts. 9 signatures I had never made. 9 promises to pay that had been broken in my name. The oldest was dated September 14th, 3 days before the dinner. 3 days before my mother handed Derek those keys and asked me to pay for the celebration. They had already bought the car. They had already stolen my future. They just hadn't told me yet. I didn't call first. I didn't text. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday morning, the denial letter folded in my jacket pocket, and I walked through the front door without knocking. The key they'd given me when I turned 16 still worked. I had never considered that a warning. My father was in his recliner, watching golf with the volume low. My mother was in the kitchen, arranging flowers she had cut from her own garden. Derek's car was in the driveway, but Derek was not in the house. Of course not. Derek was never there when things needed to be explained. Claire. My mother turned, scissors in her hand, smile already in place. We weren't expecting you. Are you staying for lunch? I spread the credit report across her kitchen island. 9 pages, 9 accounts, my name in bold on every one. Explain this. My father clicked off the television. He walked into the kitchen slowly, deliberately, the way he walked when he was preparing to manage a situation. I had seen him walk this way into my high school principal's office when I was caught skipping class, into my college financial aid office when he wanted to review my scholarships, into every room where my life needed to be adjusted to fit his plans. Where did you get this? From the bank. From the loan officer who denied my mortgage because my credit score dropped 147 points, because someone opened $124,600 in debt in my name. My mother set down her scissors. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at my father, a glance I had seen 1,000 times. The glance that asked, "Did you handle this?" The glance that confirmed he had not. "Claire," my father said. He used his reasonable voice, the one he saved for negotiations and apologies he didn't mean. "Sit down. I'll stand. Your brother needed a fast car more than you need a house." The words landed like something physical, a weight on my chest, a pressure behind my eyes. I had prepared for denial, for explanation, for the slow unwinding of excuses that would make me doubt my own memory. I had not prepared for admission, for the bald, unapologetic truth that my future was worth less than my brother's image. "That's not your decision to make." "You're right," he nodded, as if conceding a point in a debate. "It was your mother's. She signed the applications, I supervised the finances, we did what was necessary." Necessary for who? For Derek. My mother's voice, small and wounded, as if she were the one who had been wronged. "You don't understand what it's like for him. The jobs he loses, the opportunities that don't come through. He needed to look successful to get ahead. A nice car, nice things, people judge, Claire, they judge so quickly. So you stole my identity. We borrowed your credit." My father again, correcting me, managing the language. "We made the payments initially, we planned to continue. But Derek's commission structure changed and you stopped paying, and my credit was destroyed, and my mortgage was denied." Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a neighbor started a lawnmower. My mother reached for my hand and I stepped back. "You'll fix this," I said. Not a question, a demand. "We're working on it." My father's voice tightened, the first crack in his composure. "But you need to understand the position you're putting us in. If you make this public, if you involve authorities, you ruin your brother's life. The cars will be repossessed. He'll lose his job, he'll have nothing. And I'll have nothing. I'll have $124,600 in debt I didn't create and a credit score that means I can't buy a home until I'm 40. You're young." My mother again, her tears starting, the weapon she deployed when logic failed. "You have time. Derek doesn't have time. He's a man, Claire. He needs to establish himself now. You're a woman, you'll—" She stopped, but the sentence completed itself in the air between us. "You'll marry. You'll use your husband's credit. You don't need your own." I looked at her. At the woman who had taught me to balance a checkbook, to save 10%, to never depend on anyone. At the woman who had now made me dependent on her for my own financial survival. "Fix it," I said again. "We will." My father moved between us, ending the conversation. But quietly. "No banks, no lawyers, no police. Family handles family." I walked out. I didn't take the papers. I didn't need them. I had memorized every account number, every date, every forged signature that looked enough like mine to fool a lender but not enough like mine to be mine. In my car, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother, sent before I'd even reached the driveway. "You're being selfish. A house is just a building. Your brother's whole future was at stake. I thought we raised you better than this." I didn't reply. I drove to the library, the only public place I could think of where I wouldn't have to explain my face, and I sat in a corner and stared at a book I didn't read. Selfish. The word they used when I wanted something of my own, when I refused to be the resource they expected, when I insisted on being a person instead of a credit score they could spend. I was done being called selfish. I was done being spent. Derek posted the BMW 3 days later, not the Mustang, the other one. The one I hadn't known about until the credit report. Finally upgraded. Blessed Newip Hardwork Pace-Off, the photo showed him leaning against a silver SUV, sunglasses on, watch visible on his wrist. Another loan. Another signature I hadn't made. The caption made me laugh, a sound that came out wrong, sharp, and broken. I was in my apartment on my couch, the denial letter framed on my wall like a warning. I had started doing that, hanging my failures where I could see them. Reminding myself what trust cost, the family group chat lit up. My cousin Patricia, who lived in Roanoke and only appeared at Christmas, sent a clapping emoji. My Uncle Ray, my father's brother, wrote "That's my nephew, making moves." I didn't respond. I never responded anymore. But I read every message, cataloged every lie that passed for celebration. Then Derek tagged me, directly, in the comments. At Claire Brennan still driving that 2012 Corolla, maybe someday you'll catch up. Family goals. I stared at my phone. The Corolla with 180,000 miles. The car I had refused to replace because I was saving for a house. The car that had become, in my brother's narrative, evidence of my failure rather than my discipline. My Aunt Linda texted me privately. "Claire, I heard about the mortgage. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Have you considered that maybe you're just not ready? Homeownership is a big responsibility." Derek's been so careful with his finances, maybe you could ask him for advice. I read it 3 times. Derek's finances. The finances built on my stolen credit. The advice I should ask from the man driving 2 cars I had paid for. Another text. My cousin Mark. "Heard you're bitter about Derek's success. That's not a good look, Claire. Family supports family." My mother had been busy. I could see the shape of her story now, spreading through the family network like a stain. Claire tried to buy a house but couldn't get approved. Claire is jealous that her father wouldn't co-sign. Claire is making things difficult because she can't handle that her younger brother is doing better than her. The truth was simpler. I had been robbed by the people who were supposed to protect me, and they were using the robbery to prove I had never deserved protection in the first place. I called the Mustang lender on Monday. Spoke to a representative named Brian who sounded young and tired. I explained that I had never opened this account, that the signature was forged, that the mailing address was not my residence. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but the account was opened with proper identification. The social security number matched. The signature was verified by our fraud department. Can I see the original application? You'll need to submit a formal fraud claim. That requires a police report." A police report. The words my father had forbidden. The line I was not supposed to cross. I called the BMW lender next. Same conversation, same requirement. The system was designed to protect itself, not me. To verify that fraud had occurred, I had to accuse my parents of felony identity theft. To clear my name, I had to destroy theirs. I sat in my apartment that evening and calculated. The payments my parents had made initially, before they stopped, totaled $8,400. The remaining balance, with penalties and interest, was $116,200. If I accepted my father's terms, if I stayed quiet and let them handle it, I would carry this debt for 20 years. I would never buy a house. I would never have children because I couldn't afford them. I would work until I died to pay for my brother's watches and his gym membership and his blessed life. Or I could file a police report. I opened my laptop. I searched identity theft family member police report. I read stories of daughters who had turned in mothers, sons who had testified against fathers. I read about the years of legal process, the family destruction, the guilt that never fully dissolved. Then I read about the daughters who hadn't reported it, who had accepted the debt, accepted the ruined credit, accepted the narrative that they were selfish for wanting justice. They were 40 now, 50, still renting, still explaining, still carrying the weight of someone else's choices. I closed my laptop. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Documentation. My phone buzzed. Derek in the group chat again. Weekend plans, coastal drive. Sometimes you just need to clear your head. Self-care, I looked at my Kerala keys on the counter. At my apartment with its one window and its walls I couldn't paint. At the life I had built carefully, responsibly, specifically, so that I could become the person who owned a home. They were never going to pay it back. That was the truth I finally allowed myself to know. My parents had stolen $124,600 from my future, and they expected me to thank them for the opportunity to sacrifice. I picked up my phone. I found the number for the Economic Crimes Unit of the Millbrook Police Department. I saved it to my contacts. Not yet, but soon. First, I needed proof they couldn't deny. Proof that would survive my mother's tears and my father's authority and my brother's performative confusion. I needed to build a case so solid that even my own family couldn't break it. The fraud specialist's name was Alina Voss. She worked out of a strip mall office between a dry cleaner and a closed-down video store, the kind of location that made her services affordable and her expertise invisible to the people who needed it most. I found her through a forum post, a comment buried under complaints about credit repair scams. Alina Voss in Millbrook. She doesn't promise miracles. She tells you the truth. The truth was what I needed. I was done with promises. Her office smelled like coffee and old paper. She was 60, maybe 65, with reading glasses on a chain and a calculator she used instead of her computer. She listened to my story without interrupting, her pen moving across a legal pad in shorthand I couldn't read. When I finished, she set down her pen. You want to know how to fix your credit. I want to know how to buy a house. Same answer, unfortunately. She removed her glasses, cleaned them with a cloth from her drawer. You have two paths. The first, you accept the debt as yours. You negotiate payment plans, you rebuild slowly, you might qualify for a mortgage in 7 to 10 years if you're perfect. Total cost, with interest, approximately $180,000. I had calculated this myself. The number still landed like a weight. The second path, you file a police report for identity theft. You report your parents. You report the forgeries. The lenders are required to remove the accounts from your credit report while they investigate. If the investigation confirms fraud, and with family members, it usually does because they get sloppy, the accounts are permanently removed. Your credit is restored. You can apply for a mortgage in 6 months, a year at most. And my parents? Felony charges, identity theft, fraud, forgery. If the amounts are as you say, they're looking at prison time. Certainly loss of professional licenses, reputational destruction, financial penalties. She paused. How old are they? 54 and 52. They'll survive prison. They won't survive the shame, not in a town like Millbrook. I looked at my hands. They were steady. They had been steady since the bank, since the denial, since I had stopped expecting my family to be something they were not. There's no third option, no way to make them pay it back without destroying them. Alina shook her head. They committed felonies, Ms. Brennan, multiple felonies. The law doesn't have a setting for family felonies that hurt less. You either report it or you don't. You either choose yourself or you choose them. I sat with that. The binary I had been avoiding. the choice that felt less like justice and more like amputation. What do most people do? Elena put her glasses back on. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from years of watching people choose wrong. Most people don't come to see me until it's too late, until they've signed documents admitting the debt is theirs, until they've made payments that legally accept responsibility, until their parents have convinced them that love means silence. She opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. You haven't done any of that. You're here early. That's rare. She slid the folder across. Inside, forms, police report templates, contact information for each of the 9 lenders. Instructions for requesting original documentation. A timeline, step by step, of what would happen if I chose this path. Take this, don't decide today. But understand, she leaned forward, every day you wait, your parents are making choices too. They're deciding whether to pay, whether to run, whether to forge more documents to cover the first ones. The longer you delay, the more complicated this becomes. I drove home with the folder on my passenger seat. I stopped at a drive-thru, bought coffee I didn't drink, sat in a parking lot and watched people walk in and out of a grocery store with bags of food they had paid for with money they had earned. My phone buzzed. My mother. Dad wants to know if you're coming to Derek's birthday dinner next week. He's turning 27. We're doing it at Marcello's. You know how he loves that place. Marcello's. Where the bill would be $400 minimum. Where I would be expected to pay. Where my brother would make jokes about my Corolla and my apartment and my failure to launch, and my parents would smile and pass me the check. I typed back, I'll be there. I hit send. Then I opened Elena's folder and started making calls. The first lender put me on hold for 40 minutes. The second transferred me 3 times before I reached the right department. The third hung up on me twice before I finally spoke to someone who understood what I was asking for. Original applications. Signed documents, the physical evidence of my parents' forgery. We can provide copies, the representative said. There's a processing fee, 10 to 15 business days. I requested all 9. I paid the fees from my savings, the savings that were supposed to be my down payment. I gave them my address, my real address, not my parents' house. I told them I wanted everything sent certified mail, signature required. Then I called the 8th lender, the one for the BMW, and I asked a different question. Can you tell me when the loan was approved? A pause, typing. September 14th. 3 days before the dinner. 3 days before my mother handed Derek the keys and asked me to pay for the celebration. They had already stolen from me. They had already decided. The dinner was theater. The tears were costume. The family I thought I had was a performance designed to keep me docile while they spent my future. I hung up. I drove to the library and printed my credit report again, the new one, the one that showed 2 additional inquiries I hadn't authorized. They were still borrowing, still spending, still using my name like it belonged to them. Elena had warned me. Every day I waited, they made choices too. I was done waiting for them to choose differently. I was done hoping they would become the parents I had needed. I was going to become the daughter who protected herself because no one else would. I opened my laptop. I created a new document. Timeline of fraud, I typed. Then I began to write. I started with the easy lies, the ones they told without thinking because they had never expected me to check. September 14th, BMW loan approved. Mailing address, 1847 Oakwood Drive. Phone, mom's cell. Signature, not mine. I wrote it like a report. Like the compliance documentation I prepared at work, the ones where every claim needed a source, every source needed a date, every date needed a witness. I had spent 6 years learning to spot fraud in other people's files. Now I was building a file of my own. The documents arrived in waves. The first package came on a Tuesday, certified mail. the envelope too thin to contain what I needed. Inside, a photocopy of the BMW application, my signature in blue ink, my social security number in my mother's handwriting. I knew her handwriting. I had received her birthday cards for 29 years. I held the paper to the light. The signature was good, better than good. It was practiced. They had spent time on this, my parents, sitting at their kitchen table, practicing my name until it looked like I had signed away my own future. I compared it to my real signature. The one on my driver's license, my passport, the pre-approval letter from September. I found the differences. The loop on the Y was too tight. The B in Brennan had an extra flick at the bottom. 19 signatures across 9 applications, and every one of them wrong in ways a trained eye could see. I bought red pens, a dozen of them. I circled every forgery, every inconsistency, every place where my parents' desperation had outpaced their skill. The red ink looked like accusation. It looked like blood on a white page. I filled a folder, then 2, then 3. I played the role they expected, the daughter who had accepted her fate. I attended Derek's birthday dinner at Marcello's, paid the $437 bill without comment, watched my brother unwrap gifts bought with money that would eventually be traced to my ruined credit. "You're quiet tonight," my mother said. "Long week." "Still upset about the house," my father, cutting his steak, not looking up. "I told you we're working on it. These things take time." "How much time?" He set down his knife. The gesture was precise, controlled, the same gesture he had made when I was 12 and asked why Derek got a new bike and I got his old one. "Claire, family helps family. You're not the only one with needs." I nodded, I smiled. I ate my $38 salmon and calculated the compound interest on $124,600 at 24.99% APR. At home, I transcribed the dinner. Every word, every glance, every moment my mother touched my hand and called me sweetheart while she planned my financial destruction. I was building a record. I was learning to see my family the way a prosecutor would see them. The second wave of documents arrived. The Mustang loan, the credit cards, the personal loan from an online lender I had never heard of. I spread them across my kitchen table, a map of my parents' ambition for my brother. The Mustang, $42,000. The BMW, $38,500. 5 credit cards, each maxed at $15,000. The personal loan, $14,100, marked debt consolidation, spent on watches and vacations and Derek's networking events at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I found the pattern. They had started small, testing. A credit card in August, paid off immediately. Then the Mustang, with a large down payment that must have come from somewhere, my mother's inheritance, perhaps, the money she had told me was for emergencies. Then the flood once they saw how easy it was. How willing the lenders were to believe that a 29-year-old woman with steady employment wanted 6 figures of debt for reasons she could not explain. I requested more. Original documents, not copies. Applications with metadata, timestamps, IP addresses. I learned the language of fraud investigation, the specific requests that would force lenders to reveal what they knew. Some complied. Some resisted. One threatened to sue me for harassment until I mentioned the police report I was preparing. They sent the documents. In November, I began the text conversations. Careful, casual, designed to look like reconciliation while I harvested confession. "Mom, I'm still confused about the loans. Can you help me understand?" Her reply, 3 hours later, "Your father handled the details." I just signed where he told me. I screenshot it, saved it, printed it in color on archival paper. "But my name, Mom, how did my name get on them?" "We only signed your name because you wouldn't have agreed." "It's not a big deal, Claire. We were going to tell you when everything was settled." I read that sentence 100 times. "We only signed your name because you wouldn't have agreed." Admission of forgery. Admission of intent. Admission that they knew they were stealing, that they had planned to deceive me, that the settlement they imagined would never have included my consent. I replied, "I understand. Family first." She sent a heart emoji. I saved that too. My father was harder. He didn't text, didn't leave trails. He called, spoke in generalities, managed every conversation like a negotiation he was determined to win. "Claire, I need you to sign some paperwork. Retroactive authorization. Makes everything legal, cleans up the credit report." What paperwork? Standard forms. "Your mother and I spoke to an attorney. We can fix this without anyone getting hurt." Anyone, not me. Not my credit, not my future. Anyone meant them, the people who would face consequences if I refused to legitimize their theft. "I'll need to see the forms first." Of course, we'll set up a meeting. Neutral location, your attorney present if you want, just family working this out. I agreed. I thanked him. I hung up and added the call to my timeline, noting the offer to commit fraud upon fraud, the attempt to turn my silence into my signature. 4 months. I worked 4 months in secret, in the hours before my job and after. In the weekends, I told them I was too tired to visit. I built a case. I learned the law. I became the person who would not be managed, not be guilted, not be spent. On the first day of March, I received the final document. The original BMW application, complete with metadata showing it had been submitted from my father's IP address at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 hours before my mother called to invite me to dinner. They had bought the car, forged my name, and then invited me to celebrate the purchase I had unwittingly financed. I added it to my folder. The third folder, the one I would carry. Then I called Elena Voss. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask ready for what, she knew. She gave me a name. Detective Sarah Chen, Economic Crimes Unit, Millbrook Police Department. She gave me a time. Monday morning, 9 a.m. "One more thing," Elena said. "Your father called me last week. He found my name in your browser history, I assume. He wanted to know what you were planning." "What did you tell him?" "That I don't discuss clients. But Claire," she paused, "he's preparing something. He's bringing an attorney to your meeting. He's going to try to get you to sign something, anything, before you can report this. You need to control the location. You need to control the timing." I thought about my father's attorney, the one he had used for his business, for his divorce from his first wife, for every legal challenge he had faced and defeated. A man named Howard Vance, 70 years old with a reputation for making problems disappear. "Neutral location," I said. "That's what he wants." "Then give him one." I hung up. I opened my laptop. I searched public meeting spaces Millbrook. I found the address. I smiled for the first time in 4 months. The Millbrook Police Department had a community room, available for public use with advance reservation. Neutral ground, my father would think, a place where he could intimidate me without looking like he was intimidating me. I reserved it for Monday, 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes after my appointment with Detective Chen. Then I texted my father. "I'm ready to meet." Monday morning works. "I'll send the address." I didn't wait for his reply. I had work to do, a folder to organize, a life to reclaim. The red ink had dried on all 19 signatures. The confessions were saved in 3 locations. The timeline was complete. I was ready. My father's reply came at 6:47 a.m. "Monday, Howard will be there. This ends the right way." I read it 3 times, the right way, his way. The way where I signed away my anger and accepted my role as the daughter who absorbed, who adjusted, who got over it. I didn't respond. Sunday evening, I prepared. I printed 3 copies of everything, one for the police, one for my records, one for the moment I would need it. I charged my phone, tested my voice recorder, laid out my clothes like armor. Navy blazer, white blouse, slacks, professional, unmovable. The person I had been at the bank, at the library, in the 4 months of silent preparation. I slept 4 hours. I dreamed of red ink spreading across white pages, of my mother's tears dissolving the words I had written, of my father's voice saying family helps family until the phrase lost all meaning. I woke at 5 a.m. I made coffee I didn't drink. I sat in my apartment and watched the sunrise through my single window, the light changing from gray to gold to white. This was the last morning of the life they had made for me. The last morning of Claire Brennan, financial victim, silent daughter, resource to be spent. At 8:30, I drove to the police station. Detective Chen met me at the front desk, a woman in her 40s with short hair and the kind of posture that came from years of being underestimated. She led me to her desk in the Economic Crimes Unit, a cubicle with case files stacked in towers, a coffee mug that read "Follow the money." "You have the documentation?" I opened my folders. Spread the 19 red-marked signatures across her desk. The timeline, the text confessions, the IP metadata, the credit reports before and after. She read in silence. 10 minutes, 15. She turned pages without comment, her expression giving nothing away. I had prepared for skepticism, for the doubt I had faced at every lender, every phone call, every moment of explaining that yes, my parents had done this, yes, I was sure, yes, I was willing to destroy my family for the truth. Detective Chen looked up. "This is extensive. I had time. Your parents are meeting you this morning. At 9:15, in the community room, they think it's neutral ground." She considered this. "You reserved the room through our community outreach office. I can have an officer present, not in the room but nearby. I'd prefer to handle the initial confrontation myself. I need them to say things, to confirm what I have in writing. And if they don't," I touched the folder, the weight of 4 months of 19 signatures of every moment I had documented instead of cried. "Then I have this." Detective Chen nodded. She gave me her card, her direct line, instructions for what to do if I felt unsafe. She did not tell me I was making a mistake. She did not ask if I had considered my mother's feelings, my father's reputation, my brother's fragile ego. She treated me like a person with a case, not a daughter with a dilemma. At 9:05, I walked to the community room. It was small, institutional, with folding chairs and a table and a window that looked out on the parking lot. I arranged my chair facing the door. I placed my phone on the table, recording app running, screen down. I opened my folder to the first page and waited. My father arrived at 9:12. Howard Vance beside him, briefcase in hand, the kind of leather that cost more than my monthly rent. My father wore his navy suit, the one he saved for negotiations he intended to win. He saw me, saw the room, saw the institutional walls and the fluorescent lights, and his expression shifted. Not confusion, recognition. The look of a man who realized his daughter had learned to play his game. "Claire." He kept his voice warm, controlled. "This is unexpected. You wanted neutral ground. This is a police station. It's a community room, available to the public. I checked." I gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit." Howard Vance remained standing. He was studying me, I realized, the way he had studied opponents in decades of practice. Looking for weakness, for leverage, for the angle that would make this problem disappear. "Brennan," he said, "before we begin, I need to inform you that I'm representing your father in this matter. Anything you say to him—" "I'm aware of attorney-client privilege, Mr. Vance. I'm also aware that it doesn't extend to me." I opened my folder. "I asked you here because my father requested a meeting to discuss paperwork. Retroactive authorization, he called it. I assume you drafted those documents." Vance glanced at my father. A small communication, a question asked without words. My father nodded, almost imperceptibly. I prepared forms that would regularize the debt, Vance said. Make it clear that you authorized the loans, that you were aware of the arrangements, that this was a family misunderstanding rather than felony identity theft, the word landed. Vance's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A tightening, a recalculation. He had not expected me to name it. Ms. Brennan, these are family matters. The law provides flexibility for. The law provides for victims of fraud to report that fraud to the police. I stood. Which is why I requested this specific room, and this specific time. I walked to the door, opened it, led them down the hallway I had walked an hour before to the cubicle where Detective Chen sat with my folders still spread across her desk. This is Detective Sarah Chen. She's been reviewing my case since 8:30 this morning. Detective, these are the individuals I mentioned. My father, Gerald Brennan, and his attorney, Howard Vance. Detective Chen stood. She did not offer her hand. Mr. Brennan, Mr. Vance, please sit. My father didn't move. He was looking at the folders, at the red ink, at the evidence of his crimes arranged in neat pages across a police detective's desk. His face cycled through expressions I had never seen. Not anger, not control, something closer to fear. Claire, he said, what have you done? I didn't answer. I opened my folder, the third copy, and spread it on the desk beside the others. 19 signatures marked in red, the timeline, the confessions, the proof that he had stolen my future to fund my brother's present. I've done what you taught me, I said. I've documented everything. I've followed the money. I've prepared for the worst-case scenario. Howard Vance looked at the pages. He looked at my father. He looked at Detective Chen, who was watching him with the patience of someone who had seen attorneys try to talk their way out of worse situations. Then he closed his briefcase, stood, and walked out of the room without finishing his sentence. The door clicked behind him. My father stared at it, at the space where his attorney had been, at the absence of the protection he had paid for and expected. Mr. Brennan, Detective Chen said, I'm going to need you to sit down. We have a great deal to discuss. I remained standing. I had said what I needed to say. I had brought the truth to this room, to this desk, to this moment where my father's own attorney had recognized the weight of evidence and chosen to disappear. I walked to the door. My father turned, finally, and looked at me, not as a resource, not as a daughter to be managed, as a person he had failed to control. Claire, he said, not a command, a question, a sound without words behind it. I closed the door behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and breathed. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere, a phone rang. I was in a police station, my father in custody, my family in ruins, and I felt something I had not expected. Relief, not victory, not satisfaction. The simple, physical relief of truth finally spoken in a room where it could be heard. I walked to the front desk. Asked for a copy of the incident report. The officer handed it to me, my name at the top, my father's name below, the date and time recorded in official ink. I folded it into my folder, the folder that had started as documentation and become evidence. The folder that would become, I knew, the story I would tell for years to come. Not the story of the daughter who was stolen from, the story of the woman who took it back. The detective's desk became the stage. I didn't plan it that way, but some rooms choose their own gravity. My father sat in the chair I had occupied an hour before, his navy suit suddenly too large. His posture collapsed into something smaller than I had ever seen him. Detective Chen stood beside him, not touching, not restraining, simply present in a way that made leaving impossible. Another officer had appeared at the door, a young man with a notepad, watching with the professional neutrality of someone who had not yet learned which cases would stay with him. I remained standing. The wall behind me was covered in bulletin boards, case numbers, photographs of faces I didn't recognize. Economic crimes, the board said. Follow the money. I had followed it here. I had followed it home. Mr. Brennan, Detective Chen said, I'm going to read you your rights. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are being detained for questioning regarding felony identity theft, forgery, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. My father said nothing. He was staring at my folder, still open on the desk, the red ink visible from where he sat. 19 signatures. 19 moments of choice where he had chosen my brother over me, his convenience over my consent, his narrative over my name. Do you understand these rights? He nodded. A small movement, almost invisible. The gesture of a man who had spent his life giving orders and was now receiving them. I need you to say it out loud, Mr. Brennan. I understand. Detective Chen sat down. She pulled my timeline toward her, the pages I had typed in my apartment at 2 a.m., the chronology of my own destruction. Let's start with September 14th. The BMW loan. The application shows your IP address, Mr. Brennan, your home computer. Can you explain how Claire Brennan's signature appeared on a document submitted from your residence? My father looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him searching my face for rescue. For the daughter who had always adjusted, always absorbed, always made his life easier by wanting less, I gave him nothing. I don't recall, he said. You don't recall submitting a loan application for $38,500 in your daughter's name. I recall helping my son with a vehicle purchase. The details of the financing, he stopped, the sentence unfinished. He had been about to blame my mother. I could see it forming, the deflection he had perfected over decades of marriage. Your mother handled the details. I was just trying to help. The same architecture of excuse that had made her the villain and him the well-meaning father. The details, Detective Chen continued, include 19 separate forged signatures across 9 financial accounts. Total debt incurred, $124,600, all in Claire Brennan's name, all with payments that ceased after 3 months. Can you explain that pattern, Mr. Brennan? My father's hands were on the table. I watched them, the hands that had signed my report cards, handed me my first checkbook, taught me to balance a ledger while he was secretly unbalancing mine. They were trembling, almost imperceptibly, but trembling. I was going to pay it back, he said. All of it. We had a plan. A plan that required your daughter to sign retroactive authorization forms this morning. Forms that would have made her legally responsible for debt she never incurred. Howard Vance had prepared those forms. I had seen them in my father's briefcase, the folder marked confidential, the pages that would have transformed me from victim to volunteer. If I had met them in the community room, if I had been frightened enough, tired enough, daughter enough, I might have signed. I might have made their crimes my choices. I didn't. I brought them here instead. Claire, my father said, not to Detective Chen. To me, directly, finally, the way he had never spoken to me in this building, in this town, in the life we had shared. I was trying to protect the family. Derek was in a bad place. I needed a house, I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced this too, in mirrors, in empty rooms, in the 4 months of preparing for a moment I had hoped would never come. I needed my credit. I needed parents who saw me as a person instead of a resource. You gave me none of those things. Your brother is not my responsibility. The words came out sharp, final, the boundary I had spent 29 years failing to build. You made him your priority. You made his image, his cars, his success story more important than my actual life. And when I discovered what you had done, you tried to make me complicit, to make me sign away my right to be angry, to be whole, to be free of you. Detective Chen was watching me. The young officer at the door was watching me. My father was watching me with an expression I had never seen before, not anger, not control, something closer to recognition. the look of a man who had finally been seen clearly and found himself smaller than he believed. "Mr. Brennan," Detective Chen said, "I'm going to need you to come with me. We're going to continue this conversation in an interview room. You may call an attorney." Given that Mr. Vance has withdrawn from representation, we can provide you with a public defender, or you may contact counsel of your own choosing. She helped him stand. He was 62, I realized suddenly. Not old, but no longer young. The age where prison became a sentence measured in remaining years rather than served ones. I had not thought about this. In my preparation, my documentation, my red ink and timelines, I had not calculated the cost to him, to my mother. To the family I was dissolving with every word I had spoken and every word I had refused to speak. "Claire," my father said again. At the door, the young officer's hand on his arm, guiding him out. "Your mother didn't know, not all of it. We both thought we would pay it back before you found out, before it mattered." "It always mattered," I said. "You just decided it mattered less than Derek's car." He opened his mouth, closed it. The officer led him away, down the hallway I had walked, past the community room where I had arranged my own ambush, toward the interview rooms where his statement would become evidence against him. Detective Chen remained. She gathered my folders, the documentation that had started as protection and become prosecution. "Ms. Brennan," she said, "I need to inform you that this investigation will proceed to the district attorney's office. Your parents will likely be charged with multiple felonies. Your brother may face charges as well, depending on what we learn about his knowledge of the loans. I understand. You may be called to testify. At trial, if it comes to that, are you prepared for that?" I thought of my mother. Of the tears she would deploy, the guilt she would weaponize, the story she would tell of a daughter who destroyed her family over money. I thought of Derek, of his social media and his hashtags and his certainty that the world owed him success he had never earned. "I am," I said. Detective Chen nodded. She handed me a card, her direct number, instructions for what came next. The lenders would be notified. The accounts would be flagged. My credit would enter a process of restoration that would take months, not years. The house I had wanted, the house I had saved for, might still be possible. I walked out of the police station into morning light. The parking lot was half full, ordinary cars belonging to ordinary people with ordinary problems. I sat in my Corolla, the car I had kept through everything, and I did not cry. I had expected to cry. I had prepared for the collapse that would follow confrontation, the grief of finally accepting that my family had never been what I needed them to be. But instead, I felt something else. Something I had not allowed myself to name in the 4 months of preparation. Pride, not in what I had destroyed, in what I had built. The case, the documentation, the courage to bring truth to a room where lies had always prevailed. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother sent 11 minutes ago. "Where are you? Your father said you were meeting this morning. Is everything okay?" I read it 3 times. I thought of all the ways I could answer. The explanations, the accusations, the invitations to join me in the truth I had finally spoken. I thought of her tears, her defenses, her certainty that love meant sacrifice and sacrifice meant me. I typed one word. No. Then I turned off my phone. I drove home. I sat in my apartment with the folders on my kitchen table and waited for the world to change. It changed faster than I expected. The district attorney filed charges on Wednesday. My father was arrested at his office, led out in handcuffs while his employees watched. My mother was arrested at home, the house on Oakwood Drive, the address that had appeared on every fraudulent application. They were released on bond, separated, forbidden from contacting me or each other while the case proceeded. Derek's cars were repossessed on Thursday. Both of them, the Mustang and the BMW, towed from my parents' driveway while he filmed it for social media. His caption system is rigged, earning comments of sympathy from people who didn't know the system he meant was his sister's stolen credit. He called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Again. The fourth time, he texted. "You ruined everything. Mom and Dad are going to prison because you couldn't just be a good daughter, because you had to make it about you." I saved the text, added it to my folder. Evidence of the story they would always tell, the narrative that made me the villain of my own victimization. I didn't reply. I had spent 29 years replying, explaining, defending my right to exist as something other than resource. I was done with replies. On Friday, I received a letter from the first lender. The BMW loan had been flagged as fraudulent. The account was closed. The debt was removed from my credit report. 1 down, 8 to go. I taped the letter to my wall beside the denial, before and after, destruction and reconstruction. The story of how I became someone I could finally trust. My father called once from a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking, habit overriding intention. "Claire." His voice was different, smaller. The voice of a man who had discovered that control was an illusion he had sold himself. "I'm not asking you to drop the charges. I know you won't. I'm asking." He stopped, breath audible. "I'm asking if you understand. If you know that we loved you, that we were trying to help everyone, that we didn't see." "You didn't see me," I said. "That's the point. You saw a credit score, a signature you could borrow, a daughter who would get over it because I always did." I paused. Let the silence work. "I'm not getting over it this time, Dad. I'm getting past it. There's a difference." I hung up. I didn't block the number. I wanted to know if he would try again. If the man who had managed every conversation of my life would accept that this one was over. He didn't call back. 6 weeks later, the last lender removed the final account. My credit score began its climb, slow at first, then faster as the negative marks disappeared. I started saving again. Not as much, not as quickly, but saving. Building. Reconstructing the future they had tried to spend. My father's trial was scheduled for autumn, my mother's separately for winter. The district attorney told me they would likely plead that the evidence was overwhelming, that my testimony might never be needed. I prepared anyway. I reviewed my folders. I practiced my statements. I became the witness I had always needed and never been. On the first day of September, I received a letter from a mortgage broker. Pre-approval, the letter said. Based on restored credit, stable employment, documented income. The amount was smaller than before. The rate was higher, but it was real. It was mine. It was possible. I drove to the house that weekend. The one I had wanted, the one I had been denied, still on the market, price reduced, waiting. I walked through the empty rooms with a realtor who didn't know my story. She talked about square footage and school districts and natural light. I listened, but I was elsewhere. I was in the bank holding my denial, in the library printing my reports, in the police station spreading red ink across a detective's desk. "Ms. Brennan," the realtor was waiting. "What do you think?" I looked at the empty living room. The window that faced east, that would fill with morning light that no one had ever seen me wake to. "I'll take it," I said. The closing was scheduled for November. The same month as my father's trial. I didn't plan the coincidence, but I recognized it. The month when everything would be decided, when the last of their crimes would be answered and the first of my choices would be finalized. I didn't invite them. Not to the closing, not to the house, not to the life I was building from the wreckage of the one they had tried to make me accept. I invited Elena Voss, who had told me the truth when I needed it. Detective Chen, who had treated me like a case worth solving. My coworker Patricia, who had covered my shifts while I built my documentation and never asked why. 3 people. Enough. On the day of the closing, I woke early. I made coffee I actually drank. I dressed in the same navy blazer I had worn to the police station, the armor I had chosen for battle now repurposed for beginning. The house was empty when I received the keys. The realtor had left, the paperwork signed, the deed recorded in my name alone. I walked through each room, listening to my footsteps echo on hardwood I would eventually cover with rugs, walls I would eventually paint, a life I would eventually fill. In the living room, I stopped. The light was perfect, morning gold through the east window, the same light I had imagined in the years of saving, the months of denial, the weeks of restoration. I sat on the floor. No furniture yet. Just me and the house and the silence of a debt finally paid, a credit finally restored, a family finally finished with taking. My phone buzzed. A news alert, automatic, unwanted. Local businessman Gerald Brennan pleads guilty to identity theft, fraud, sentencing scheduled. I read it once. Closed the phone. Set it face down on the floor beside me. Not victory, not satisfaction. Something simpler, something I was still learning to name. Peace. The kind that comes not from winning, but from refusing to lose yourself. From choosing truth over comfort, documentation over tears, your own future over someone else's borrowed success. I lay back on the empty floor, looked up at the ceiling, the light fixture I would replace, the cracks I would repair. My house, my name, my choice. The silence was complete. No phone calls to answer, no debts to calculate, no family to manage or explain or forgive. Just breathing, just being. Just the sound of my own life, finally, with nobody else's noise in it. I stayed there until the light shifted, until morning became afternoon, until I was ready to stand and begin. This was the house they tried to take. This was the life they tried to spend. This was the woman they failed to break. I got up. I opened the door. I walked into my future, one step at a time, on floors that belonged to me, in light that asked nothing, carrying only what I had built myself. That was enough. That was everything. The sentencing was in December, 3 weeks before Christmas. I didn't attend. I had learned that some victories don't require witnesses, that justice moves forward whether you watch or not. My father received 4 years, suspended to 18 months with restitution and probation. My mother received 2 years, suspended entirely, with community service and mandatory counseling. The judge cited their lack of prior criminal history, their apparent remorse, the family context that made their crimes somehow comprehensible. I read the transcript online, the words reduced to pixels on a screen, and felt nothing I could name. Derek moved to Florida. I learned this from my cousin, the one who had texted me shame on you through my brother's speakerphone, who now sent a tentative message asking if I was doing okay. Derek's Instagram showed a rental apartment, a new job in sales, a car he described as modest, without acknowledging that modesty had been forced upon him. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply disappeared into the narrative of someone who had been wronged by circumstances, by the system, by a sister who couldn't understand family. I understood family perfectly. That was the problem. My mother called once after sentencing. I answered because I was still learning, still hoping that truth might create connection where lies had failed. "Claire," she said. Her voice was different, thinner. The tears she had always deployed now sounded exhausted, a weapon used too often and too long. "Your father's attorney says we can appeal the restitution. The amount, it's impossible. We'll be paying until we're 80. "You'll be paying until it's paid," I said. "That's how debt works." "You could," she stopped. The sentence hung incomplete. You could drop it. You could forgive. You could be the daughter we needed instead of the person you became. "I could what, Mom?" Silence. The sound of her breathing, ragged and familiar, the soundtrack of my childhood. The noise that meant I was supposed to fold, to comfort, to make myself smaller so she could feel bigger. "I have to go," I said. "I'm painting the kitchen." I hung up. I was not painting the kitchen. I was sitting on my couch in my house, looking at a wall I had not yet decided what color to make. But the sentence was true in a larger sense. I was building, I was choosing. I was creating a life that required my attention more than her grief did. She didn't call again. The restitution payments began in January. Small amounts drawn from my parents' remaining assets, their retirement accounts, the equity in the house on Oakwood Drive that would eventually be sold to satisfy what they owed. I received checks with memo lines that read fraud restitution and deposited them without comment. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Simply the mechanical process of making accounts balance, of forcing the numbers to reflect a truth they had tried to hide. In March, I received a letter from my father's prison, not from him, from the facility informing me that he had requested my name be added to his approved visitor list. I did not respond. The request expired. He did not request again. In April, I refinanced my mortgage. The rate was better now, my credit fully restored, my employment history solid and documented. The loan officer recognized my name from the news coverage, the small-town story that had made brief national attention. Daughter turns in parents for identity theft. Family fraud exposes dark side of financial abuse. I saw the recognition in her eyes, the curiosity, the question she didn't ask. "Congratulations, Ms. Brennan," she said instead. "Your application is approved." I walked out with paperwork that felt lighter than it should. The weight of documentation, of proof, of constant vigilance against the next betrayal, it didn't disappear with approval. It became habit. It became structure. It became the way I moved through the world, checking signatures, verifying statements, trusting only what I could verify. Some would call this damage. I called it education. Summer came. I planted a garden in the small yard behind my house. Vegetables I had never grown, failures and successes I documented in a notebook without red ink. I joined a book club at the library, the same library where I had printed my first credit report, where I had sat with strangers and learned to see my family clearly. I made friends who didn't know my story, who treated me as normal, as ordinary, as someone whose past was not headline news. I told them eventually. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in pieces when the conversation turned to family, to trust, to the ways we learn who we are. They listened without performing grief or judgment. They simply heard me. That was new. That was enough. In August, I received a package. No return address, postmarked Millbrook. Inside, a photograph framed in cheap wood of my grandfather and me at my college graduation. I was 22, smiling, holding a diploma I had earned with my own work. He was 78, his hand on my shoulder, his expression proud in a way I had never seen directed at me before or since. A note in my mother's handwriting: "He always said you were the strong one." I thought that meant you didn't need us. I was wrong. I set the photograph on my mantle, not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Simply acknowledgement, placed where I could see it, where I could decide daily what it meant. I did not write back. September marked 1 year. 1 year since the denial, the discovery, the confrontation. 1 year since I became someone I had not planned to be. I marked it quietly, with dinner at a restaurant I chose, with a glass of wine I paid for, with the solitude that had become not lonely but simply mine. My phone buzzed. An alert: my father had been released to a halfway house. 3 months early, good behavior, the system functioning as systems do. I read the notification twice, then closed it. He was free. I had been free long. That evening, I sat on my porch. The garden was producing tomatoes I didn't know how to use, zucchini that grew faster than I could harvest. The light was fading, summer giving way to autumn, the cycle I had watched from windows that were not mine and now watched from one that was. A car stopped on the street. I watched it without concern. My cameras were installed, my locks secure, my boundaries clear and enforced. I was no longer someone who could be surprised in her own home. The door opened. My brother stepped out. He looked different, smaller somehow, though his frame was the same. The confidence that had carried him through 26 years of borrowed success had been replaced by something more tentative, more calculating. He looked at my house, at my porch, at me sitting in a chair I had bought with my own money, and he did not smile. "Claire, Derek, I didn't know if you'd be home. You could have called. I didn't know if you'd answer." He walked to the edge of my lawn, not crossing onto the property, maintaining a distance that felt deliberate. Respectful, perhaps, or fearful. I couldn't tell which, and I found I didn't care. "Mom told me where you live. I know I shouldn't. I know you don't want." He stopped. Ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from our father. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. The silence stretched. Crickets began in the garden, the evening sound I had learned to love. "For what?" I asked. He blinked. "For everything. For the cars, for the loans, for not knowing." He stopped again, the sentence catching. "For not wanting to know, for letting them tell me it was handled, for letting them tell me you were just being difficult. And for the texts, the things I said, the way I made you the problem when you were," his voice cracked, "when you were the one they hurt." I watched him. My brother, who had driven 2 cars bought with my stolen credit, who had mocked me for my Corolla and my apartment and my failure to match his success, who had never asked how the loans were arranged, never questioned the ease of his own good fortune, never considered that someone else's sacrifice might be making his life possible. "Why now?" I asked. He looked at the house, at the garden, at the life I had built from the documentation of his comfort. "Because I finally understand what it cost," he said. "Not the money, he gestured, vague, helpless, the sister I had, the family I thought we were. I didn't know they were taking from you. But I knew you were unhappy, I knew something was wrong, and I didn't ask because I didn't want to know." I nodded. This was more than I had expected, more than I had prepared for in the months of imagining what I would say if this moment came. "Do you need something?" I asked. "Money, a place to stay, connections for a job, because I need to be clear, no." He stepped back, hands raised. "No, I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I know, that I'm trying to know better, that I'm in therapy, actually, and the therapist said I should." He laughed, a broken sound. "She said I should acknowledge the harm I participated in, even if I didn't mean to, especially because I didn't mean to." I stood. Walked to the edge of the porch, not crossing onto the lawn, maintaining my own distance. We faced each other across the grass I had mowed, the boundary I had established, the space that was finally mine to define. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "That's it. That's what I can offer right now." He nodded, slowly, as if the motion cost him something. "Fair, more than fair." He turned, walked to his car, stopped with his hand on the door. "Claire." "Yes. The house looks good. You look good." "I'm glad," he paused. "I'm glad you got what you needed. Even if the way you got it, even if," I agreed. He drove away. I watched his taillights disappear, then sat back down on my porch. The crickets continued. The tomatoes waited. The evening settled into the peace I had built, piece by piece, from the wreckage of a family that had tried to spin me into non-existence. I thought of my father's attorney, walking out of the police station without finishing his sentence. The moment when professional self-preservation overcame loyalty to his client. The recognition that some cases cannot be managed, some truths cannot be negotiated, some daughters cannot be convinced to accept their own erasure. I had become that daughter. The one who documented instead of cried, who prepared instead of hoped, who brought red ink to a negotiation and made it stick. My phone buzzed. A text from Alina Voss, the fraud specialist who had told me the truth when I needed it. 1 year. "Checking in, how are you?" I typed back. "In my house, in my garden, in my life. How are you?" Her reply came slowly, carefully, the way she spoke. "Still telling the truth. Still watching people choose. You chose well." I set the phone down. looked at the photograph on my mantel, visible through the window, my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, his pride. His recognition, brief and final, that I was someone worth seeing. I was seen now, by myself if by no one else. By the life I had built, the boundaries I had enforced, the silence I had learned to inhabit without loneliness. The porch light flickered on, automatic, responding to darkness I had not yet noticed. I sat in its glow and listened to my own breathing, my own heartbeat, my own life continuing without apology or explanation or red ink. This was the house they tried to take. This was the credit they tried to spend. This was the daughter they failed to break. I went inside. I locked the door behind me. I made dinner for one, in a kitchen I had painted the color I chose, with vegetables I had grown in soil I had prepared, and I ate in silence that was not empty but full. Full of me, of everything I had saved, of everything I had become. That was enough. That was everything.